Why did Netero call the Zodiacs against Meruem and the Chimera Ants? Is he an idiot? All right, he's not an idiot, but this is a really good question because why didn't Netero call in the big guns for this? And I think we can ultimately boil it down to three reasons: bureaucracy, strategy, and hubris. So let's talk about it. Okay, so first let's talk about bureaucracy. And this is one of the reasons I love Hunter x Hunter, because stuff like this is so real to me. Because let's say there's some kind of obscure problem developing in the world. The government bigwigs just get on the phone and kind of hand it off to somebody else, right? Which is exactly how we see this go down. The big unnamed suits call Netero and they're like, hey, deal with this ant problem we're hearing about. And he's like, we can do whatever we want to do it. And they're like, yeah, just take care of it. And Netero realizes, yeah, they're just trying to get rid of the problem, and then if something goes wrong, they can blame us. And then on top of the faceless suits just handing off the responsibility and not taking this threat as seriously as they probably should, there was also more than likely intentional sabotage to this mission along every step of the way via Pariston Hill. Because you got to remember that during this entire time, Pariston was secretly working with Beyond Netero, and we know they had the ultimate goal of getting to the Dark Continent, which couldn't happen until Old Man Netero passed away. And it's been a long theory that maybe the two of them even orchestrated the Chimera Ants coming to the human world in order to get Netero killed, but I don't even think we need to buy into that for this specifically, because even that part aside, we know that Pariston was making it difficult for this mission to go off successfully. Now, maybe it was because he decided to capitalize on the situation and maybe hoped Netero would die without having deliberately set up the Chimera Ants himself. But even beyond that, we know that he had contingencies to use the Chimera Ants in the aftermath of the Chimera Ant arc in order to take over the Hunters Association if he needed that to go down. So the point is, Pariston's a schemer, and he was scheming even during all of this. So I would not put it past him to have been actively sabotaging this mission the entire time. In any case, at the very least, some shenanigans were going down, because at one point, Moral requests that a very specific hunter be sent over from the association to help them with the Chimera Ants. And instead of sending the person he asked for, they send a random temporary hunter. And remember who's in charge of all of the temporary hunters? Pariston. And on top of that, when they're arguing in this scene and he's mad about this bureaucratic red tape they're having to jump through, Nove reminds him that says, hey, if you go over the dude to the board's head, you're only going to get Netero in trouble. Like, he's going to be the one to take the blame, and they want him to take the fall for this. Because remember, he even had to argue with the board just to get you and I to be able to come on this mission. So Netero's hands were like super tied to begin with in terms of who he was able to take on this mission. So bureaucratic incompetence or malicious sabotage, you be the judge. But the point is, at the end of the day, this mission just wasn't handled properly by the official channels. Now, don't get me wrong, if Netero had wanted to bring all of the Zodiacs with him, then he would have, because who's going to stop him, right? So that's why there's more at play here than just the bureaucracy stuff, which brings us to our next point: strategy. Because even though Netero had to jump through hoops in order to get Moral and Nove on his team, he still chose them for a reason. And that's because at the onset of this mission, one, they weren't aware of the gravity of the situation, but two, they wanted to be stealth and undercover and handle this quietly and with as few casualties as possible, right? So you're only going to take in the small hit squad if that's all you need. You're not going to send in the entire full force of the army, right? And so that's what they did. And this was a very carefully constructed team to do just that. And this point is even explicitly made clear when Netero asks the two of them, like, hey, what should our plan be? How should we proceed? And Nove is like, why are you being coy? You know exactly what we're here to do. That's why you chose the two of us to come with you. We're going to exterminate these ants silently one by one. And that's because with their unique combination of abilities, Nove's hide and seek and Moral's deep purple, they were able to lure the ants one by one or in small groups into this pocket dimension where Netero could take care of them. Quick, clean, and easy. The point is, Netero intentionally didn't call in the Zodiacs, just like he intentionally didn't bring a huge army of hunters with him because he didn't want a war. He says so right here. I would prefer a solution that avoided fighting. That's the last thing I want to do. Our target is the queen and the queen alone. So this was like an extraction mission, right? Well, not extraction, but be quiet, get in, get the queen, and get out. And Moral and Nove were far better suited to that mission than the Zodiacs were. All right, so that all tracks, right? But what about after Meruem was born and after he realized how grave of a threat this was? Well, that's where our third point comes in: hubris. Because as you can see, Netero asks Colt, the Chimera Ant, to gauge his strength compared to Meruem's to see how they stack up. And what does Colt tell him? Basically that you've got no shot, old-timer. And how does Netero react to this? Let me call the Zodiacs. No, he laughs and says, I'm happy to hear that. A challenger at my age. What a thrill, what a thrill. This man spent his entire life in search of that great fight, and he realizes that he may have found it in his old age. So should he have called the Zodiacs? Should he have brought in more backup? Maybe, but perhaps he was clouded by the fact that he may actually get to challenge himself and decided against it. So was this hubris? Was he too arrogant? Was he too selfish in that he wanted to satisfy his own desire and challenge himself at the risk of dooming humanity? And I would say yes, but it's not as bad. We're going to give him a little bit credit here because of the existence of Poor Man's Rose. Because if Netero was not up to the task and couldn't handle Meruem, then the Poor Man's Rose was going to get the job done in his place. So he did have that contingency, but I still think this was a bit misguided. You know, you take a bunch more of the Zodiacs with you, maybe you don't have to use the Poor Man's Rose, but that was a trade-off that he was willing to make. So yeah, that's why Netero didn't call for backup, in my opinion. It was a combination of the bureaucracy at play, the strategy in place, and his own hubris. And I want to give a huge shout out to Habib and Justin, who asked me questions about this topic, and I think I've pretty much covered it, but I do want to handle the bottom question there, which is why Netero didn't also hire Silva and Illumi when he hired Zeno. And it's because he didn't hire Zeno to like help him fight the king. It was really just to help him get the king to a one-on-one position. So for that reason, he didn't need more Zoldycks because Zeno was able to accomplish that on his own. And then while we're on the subject of the Chimera Ant arc, I had Carson ask me to rank all of the characters in this arc based on my enjoyment of them. So here is that list here. There's 16 characters. I may have forgot somebody important. If I did, y'all let me know. And I think for the most part, this list is going to be pretty self-explanatory. Meruem, of course, at top because I think he's one of the most well-developed characters in this entire manga. Seeing his journey of basically getting humanity and understanding compassion was just so compelling. So that's why he's at the top. Gon and Killua are right beneath him. You guys know Killua is my favorite character. So the only reason Gon is above him in this arc is because I feel like the development he went through was more interesting, right? Almost the inverse of Meruem. So I just loved that. And Killua's right under him because his, trying to grasp with he and Gon's relationship, and are they still friends, or is he just here to help Gon with this mission? Like, that was all fantastic. I love the dynamic Togashi has created between his, two main characters there. Pito is the next highest because I think she's the most interesting Chimera Ant, not named Meruem. Especially cool to see her depth and development with Komugi when she's trying to protect her in order to, serve the king. Loved all of that. The rest of these are pretty self-explanatory, I would think. Ikago is so high because he's my favorite Chimera Ant that's not the king or one of the royal guards. I love his entire story with Killua. Meleoron on the list for a very similar reason. Loved his story and the way he decided to try and get, not revenge, but like take out the king to like make everything right. Loved that. And, again, pretty self-explanatory here, but moving down toward the bottom of the list, Kite is so low because, yeah, he's a cool character, but, like, pretty one-dimensional. He didn't really have much of an arc in this arc. And, yeah, he gets taken out rather quickly, so I'm not blaming him for it, but that's why he's low. Nova's in last place because, yeah, he did have an interesting arc, but he's a coward. So, I mean, I didn't, love him, right? But let me know y'all's thoughts. I'm sure most people have the top 5 probably roughly the same as me, but if you got anything interesting, definitely hit me with it. Anyways, y'all, that's going to do it for this one. Another shout out to Carson, Habib, and Justin. Thank you all for the support, and thank you guys for watching.